Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. This week, we welcome another amazing female leader in football to the show, as you get to sit down with Ashlee-Fontes Comber, owner and CEO of the Tallahassee Reckoning. Ashlee and I had a fantastic conversation about what it's been like to build the football team, what makes it unique, their business model, and much more. But she also shares some great advice for female leaders in football and her views on the current state of women's football. So overall, this is a great conversation for those of you out there who are interested in women's football. And you know it, Juan Valdez, which is 100% premium Colombian coffee, did not miss it. I must admit, I'm very picky when it comes to coffee, as you know. And I must say, Juan Valdez definitely hits the bar. But this cup of coffee is much more than that. It is a premium blend developed by female coffee makers, and Juan Valdez has this program in which they look to empower these women, both economically and socially. This resonates very, very much with the Female Leadership in Football initiative we launched at World Football Summit a few months back. So I'm very excited to partner with them to offer this premium blend to you. You can order it online at es.juanvaldez.com. And they actually have a special discount for the World Football Summit podcast listeners. All you need to do is enter the code WFS podcast at checkout. Again, the website is es.juanvaldez.com, and the code is WFS in capital letters, followed by podcast at checkout. And they deliver to all markets in Europe. So give it a try and let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. And finally, remember, there's still time to buy your ticket for WFS Asia, taking place in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on December 12th and 13th. Head over to asia.worldfootballsummit.com and buy the ticket that will secure your spot among the football industry's greatest minds. Again, that's asia.worldfootballsummit.com. And now, enjoy this conversation with Ashlee-Fontes Comber. Well, Ashlee, I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you for a long time, and I'm glad to say I can finally welcome you to the show.
I'm excited too. Thanks for having me.
Sure, it's a pleasure. I think we're going to talk about many interesting things today, like women's football. We're going to talk about your role at the Tallahassee Reckoning. We're going to talk about leadership for female industry leaders. I mean, it's going to be a fun one. But before we go into it, I don't know if you can introduce yourself. And I always like to ask my guests, why is it that you do what you do?
Sure. So again, my name's Ashlee-Fontes. I would describe myself as an advocate, an architect, and ambassador of the women's game. Coming from a playing background, a coach, an executive board member, humbly one of the most successful architects in the modern women's game. I'm a record-setting alumni of Florida State University, the women's soccer team there. I was a founding executive of the Washington Spirit, building it from scratch and leading them to sell out games, established a robust youth academy, achieving profitability within year 3. I co-founded the Player Charged Girls Academy League across the U.S. after the U.S. Development Academy was eliminated. I was the first female of color to be elected at the largest soccer coach association in the world, serving as president in 2022 for United Soccer Coaches. And now I'm deep into the project with ties of 20 plus years of tested experience into bringing that into focus as the owner and CEO of Tallahassee Reckoning. And, honestly, my why is it comes down to opportunity and ownership. Opportunity in the sense that the Professional Women's League folded the year before I graduated college. And not having that opportunity was heartbreaking, and it stuck with me. And I want to make sure that others that have poured their lives into the game didn't have that same fate. And then from the ownership perspective, Too many adults, coaches, they think they own players and actively either work against them or for them. From youth to pro, I've been adamant in all that I've done and been involved with that we have to create the right systems for players to have control and support of their own journeys. And that's exactly what we did with the Girls Academy League. And everyone has a platform to use their voice. And then personally, I do it because I love it. I love soccer. I love sports. They've saved my life many times, and I'll be forever indebted to the game.
Well, that's excuse me for my language, but that's hell of a background. And yes, it's really great to see that someone with your experience does it for the love of the game. I think that's the first lesson I think anybody can take from this conversation, no? But
Right.
so let's talk about the Tallahassee Reckoning. I mean, given your experience, you've seen it all basically in women's. Forgive me because I call it women's football, but we can call it
Right.
women's soccer. Um, what is it, and why does the world need a team like it?
Sure. So we are a women's soccer franchise emerging out of Tallahassee, Florida. We have 12 months of programming, including college pro track training and development, and our pre-professional team reserves teams will compete in the summer of 2024. We'll also be providing coaching development as well to make sure we're growing the game and the players the right way here. And honestly, we emerged because of our local girls. We need to put them first, put their development first, and we will. We hope that the best from across the country and possibly some international players will come join us in the summer. The players that are on the cusp of playing pro or at the end of their collegiate career should definitely come play for us, and that's what we're anticipating. The world needs clubs like Tallahassee Reckoning because we're working to break the geographic and institutional barriers that prevent equitable access and opportunity for players.
Okay, nice. And what have been like the major challenges of building a team like the Reckoning?
Sure. Well, it's different because it's a much smaller market. And we're so externally it's harder to get people have really enjoyed what the messaging we put out, the branding and everything like that. But it's a harder sell because it's not a major metropolitan area like all the other major teams are in major sports leagues. And then internally, in Tallahassee itself, we're introducing something new or doing things a little differently. So there's an education process and a trust building process that's required, and that takes time.
I guess so, right? I mean, in football and soccer, it takes more time than in a regular business, I would say, right? Um,
Right.
and how? Because I'm wondering, given your experience at the Washington Spirit, how did that prepare you for your role today?
Sure. Whether it was DC United Women, the Washington Spirit, or the Girls Academy, it's resourcefulness. Being with 4 women's soccer startups and then one for men's basketball, actually professional basketball, you don't have a lot of resources to work with right off the bat. So it's being methodical, it's being intentional, it's leaning on connections and strengths that you have. And I did that with the Washington Spirit. We had nothing from to start, and we just built relationships, built trust, and then we're just replicating it here in Tallahassee.
Well, I can relate to that. I was actually some years ago. I was part of a local team. This local team eventually became what today is known as the Real Madrid women's team, right? But back then,
Mhm.
it was a very local team, and you would just have to be very scrappy about everything that you did,
Right.
just to get out there, no? So I can really relate to
Right.
that.
Right.
Interesting. And in terms of okay, so you have a smaller market, it's a new
Mhm.
project and all of that. So I'm wondering, I don't want to go into the numbers because I understand you can't share them, but is there
Right.
anything you can tell us about the pillars of the sports business model at this point?
Sure. Again, so we are trying to do things a little differently. We're not, the one of the first people I spoke with when I was setting this up, they're like, "Oh, just go after the lowest hanging fruit." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, just get as many youth players as you can and start charging money." I'm like, "I don't want to do that." The youth industry here across all sports is catered to the people that can afford it, and I don't like that. And that's something that we are trying to break. So for us, our revenue drivers will be merchandise sales, ticket sales, and sponsorships. Then we are setting up a foundational arm that will allow companies and individuals to receive tax benefits when they contribute money, and those will go directly to player development resources. So we're going to be relying heavily on getting the full community activated and behind us and really engaged and feeling like this is their club to own as well. And hopefully, as that happens, the sponsorships go hand in hand with what we're trying to drive, and then merchandise is the fun piece on top.
Yeah.
And we have a really cool brand and logo, so that is going well.
Oh yeah, you do. And on the partnerships front, actually, okay, I mean, just because you're in a quote unquote smaller market doesn't mean you're able to land major partnerships. And you've actually, if I'm not mistaken, you just closed a partnership with Hummel. Who works with like, I'm just thinking about teams like Denmark. It's a global brand.
Right.
It's a it's a renowned brand around the world. No? So
Yeah.
what can you share about that agreement? And I don't mean about the financials because I don't want to get into
Sure.
that, but I'm curious about why you chose them, and what is the opportunity that each side sees on this
Mhm.
deal.
Yeah, you know what? I think we really lucked out with Hummel because we had conversations with other brands, and I just wasn't feeling it. I didn't want to reinforce what's wrong with what I believe is what's wrong with our society and where somebody else's logo to give them value. These are such massive producers, the apparel brands, that they can give us all the free gear in the world, but at the end of the day, they don't see us, they don't
Mm,
know us, and they don't care about us. And making cool commercials brings us zero value, right? Our girls and women deserve much better after being ignored and overlooked for their entire existence here in Tallahassee. We will not give our value away and sell out to be one of the cool kids.
uh-huh.
That was the mentality. Um, Now with Hummel, our players will have the opportunity to build their own collective brand, one that represents them and inspires future generations. When each of our players puts on their kits, it's going to be one of their own design, one that of their own representation. So essentially, we chose we got lucky. They came in at the ninth hour, and we chose them because we have very strong synergies with our missions. It's not solely about business; it's about the impact that we can make to better communities. In our conversations, they really seem to know us and understand what we're trying to do, our why, and our grand vision. And they're committed to collaborate with us along this long journey that we have ahead, and I'm really excited about that. And then, not to mention, like the more conversations we had, their team is absolutely incredible, and they have a really strong support system, which is important as we are in this startup phase ourselves. So the opportunity that each side sees, I can't quite speak for them, but I think the opportunity absolutely is impact. We can create disruption in a very good, positive way to hopefully change industry thought and open minds about, when you invest in the individual, in the human, the sustainable return will exponentially exceed any possible monetary value.
Nice. So just to clarify, each player can actually personalize their design in a way. How does that work?
Yeah, so what we did, this is great. So we have a local company that we collaborate with, woman owned. It's called Grova Creative, and they sat down with us. They did this with our logo too, but they sat down with our players that are in market right now and had a brainstorming session. Like, what do you want to see in the kits? How does this represent you? What's important? And then they came up with several different designs for our home kits for field players and goalkeepers, and then the same thing with our away kits. And we just actually had public voting for these. The players have already voted and selected which ones they want. So it's their vision has been brought to life by Grova Creative, and then Hummel is going to fully customize them for us.
Wow, that's awesome. Because
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, you're combining here. I mean, you're taking partnerships to a whole new level here. I mean, you're involving a major international brand
Mhm.
with a local business and the community. And when I speak
Right.
about community, I speak about the fans, I guess, but also the players. So you're kind of like looping everybody together. And that's something that I
Right.
hadn't heard before. So wow, that's very original. Wow, congrats on that because it sounds really cool.
Thank you.
And to your point, I like what you said about the goal being impact,
Mhm.
because I think that's an evolution we're seeing in the industry now, where sponsorship and partnerships are more focused now on creating impact rather than just awareness and visibility. And I think the
Right.
industry needs that. So interesting. And then, so I'm thinking, so you guys have a very strong, call it local, geographic, and institutional component, right? And so
hmm
I'm wondering, does a project like this scale, or is there any type of expansion in mind, or how does that work?
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, we're trying to work on breaking these geographic and institutional barriers. I think when we talk about scale and expansion, a couple of things are a goal of ours is to create a realistic template for other areas similar to Tallahassee to be able to then streamline and replicate. Um, and then two, our grand vision is to complete the full pathway here by expanding to the full professional first team and building a facility. So we need to prove that it can be done here in a very sustainable and feasible way that's going to create instrumental impact for each individual lives for the girls and women in the game, on and off the pitch, and just reinvigorate communities. If we can create that template as we're piloting this right now, it'll be so much better for the growth and development of soccer across the country.
So in a way, it's kind of like a franchise. No, you set up like
Yeah.
different franchises in different areas of the country, right? Nice.
Right, right. I mean, we would love to be able to do that, and at least, and we don't have to own everything. Obviously, I mean, I think ownership, like I mentioned before, is a really critical piece that communities need to own some of this. The players need to own some of this. So if we can create that template and say, hey, look, we worked out most of the kinks for you. Here it is. Like that would be amazing.
Nice. Okay. And you alluded to that before. Is that the measure of success? Like seeing the model being replicated, or are there any ways you're going to measure success of the project?
Yeah. So there's a few. So I think first for us, because we are player centered, that we're doing this because of our local players that I've watched over the last 7 years. Um, the most important marker of success is going to be player development. So that's college straight to pro or youth national teams to eventual full national teams. That's one. A second major marker of success is going to be growth in access for girls to expert soccer resources, specifically in our grassroots community here. They all have the right to dream. We'll look to do that through community clinics, partnerships with the school systems, and other local girls organizations. And then a third measurement of success is our community, our fans, right? When the people are driving around town with their reckoning magnets and flags on their cars, when the stands are packed, when the community and the reckoning become one, I think that's going to be a true measurement of success. Because in a city like Tallahassee, that happens already with FAMU American football and Florida State American football. Like things shut down, so we'll know that's a major marker of our success when that happens with us in our games, and people are just the town shuts down to come to our games.
Interesting. Because what I liked about what you just said is at the end of the day, the way you show proof of concept is purpose driven. Because you didn't talk
Right.
about revenues, you didn't talk about profit, you talked about, more social impact, if you will, right? The community, the
Right.
players, so that's nice to hear. Good.
Right.
So wow, very interesting project. We'll follow along
Yeah.
from here. But I also wanted to, take this opportunity to speak to you about women's football, because you know the
Mhm.
space so well. And I'm just curious. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions on that as well. And
Sure.
I guess it's time, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
Mhm.
women's football is riding a great wave of momentum, and it's finally here. It's great to see. Um,
Mhm.
so, you know, while you were president of the United Soccer Coaches, what was it like to see, that growth or to live through an area like that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, honestly, the momentum that we see now has been because of the previous 20 years of work, right?
Hmm.
People think it's going to happen overnight. It never does. And speaking from experience, it's because of, again, humbly saying this, but it's because of people like myself that dug in and helped create and build these structures and systems before the cameras were on, before the media attention, before the HR safety laws, and before the money, right? We really believed in a vision and something better for our players, something better for our coaches, something better for our communities. And we dug in and we did that. From the lens as president of United Soccer Coaches, I mean, we still have so much work to do. It was fun to see, but so much work. And the work that we are doing now won't truly mature, for another few years, like say another 10 years, then you'll really see those outcomes of the labors that we've done now. For instance, like especially from a coaching lens, like attracting, developing, hiring, or retaining female coaches is still a massive issue. Massive issue. And and you can just see that when you look at how many female, and I don't have the numbers, so I should have brought the numbers for you, but
No
look at
worries.
how many female head coaches that we have in the NCAA, which, against across colleges, right? Same thing. How many female head coaches do we have in the NWSL? How many female head coaches do we have? And that's still a massive issue. So even though, we can sit on this throne sometimes of, hey, we're doing great, it's like, wow, we've done a lot of work to get where we are now, made great strides, but we still have so much work to do.
Yeah, to your point, I don't know how, I mean, this is not the exact phrase, but I was thinking how overnight success is takes years in the making at the end of the day, right? So, it's kind
Yes.
of like, I think that's to your point of what you were mentioning before. There's a lot of work to do. And one day, suddenly the magic happens and,
Right.
it's a great momentum. Everybody's, oh, look, how many women are coaching teams, right? So, yeah,
Right.
I get it. It's a
Right.
matter of patience, I guess, right? And resilience, right?
Absolutely.
And since your time at the Washington Spirit, I mean, how have you seen the game change most? Is there anything that you would highlight?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the tides turning in ownership is the biggest step forward, in my opinion. I can't really go into more detail just to be respectful of everybody, but other than to say that ownership changes were absolutely needed, and they've happened, and you have a very different type of ownership coming into different teams that is extremely positive. I also think, players that were in the NWSL when I was leading the Spirit, some even playing for the Spirit, are now in leadership roles with other teams. And that's incredible. I think that's
Nice.
huge because they will be player centered and fight for player standards. I mean, the best story watching her growth and development over the last few years is Yael Averbush, right? She is GM at Gotham FC,
Hmm.
and they struggled,
Yeah.
but she kept working, she kept bringing in the right people, and this is all from a spectator point of view. And now her team's in the national championship, or the NWSL championship this upcoming weekend,
Yes. Nice.
so to go from last place to first place, and that's player led. I think, Karina LeBlanc, look at her, and Angela Hucles, Magano, like that's what we need. And that's so refreshing to see that happening.
I agree. And the good thing is once you have people that know the game and then they're able
Mhm.
to build, call it, leadership skill, business skills, to graduate, that's what the game needs really to grow even
Right.
further, right?
Right.
Um, So, and to your point about ownership, I mean, and one of the consequences of this momentum is that you look at franchise valuations at the National Women's Soccer League, and they've just gone through the
Mhm.
roof. So you look at the average. I think now it's like 66 million for a franchise. But you look at
Right.
Angel City or San Diego Wave, and just a year ago, and they were paying for the expansion fee between 2 and 5 million, right? So it's
Right.
massive. So
Right.
I mean, how do you see this? Is this sustainable?
Look, I hope so. If it was honestly, if we were only thriving in the US, then I would say no. But I think we've hit a really good stride globally. Like the women, like I think the major event that happens, it was the Women's Champions League final in 2022 changed everything.
Yeah,
Right? Then the Euros followed, then NWSL records were being shattered, then the World Cup, and it doesn't stop. So I think the biggest success we've had in the US is because the women's game has been completely unleashed overseas, and
yeah,
it's been massive. So now it's like we have to keep up.
yeah. I agree. This actually makes me think of a quote that Andrea Ekblad, she's a former responsible for women's football at the Zone
Mhm.
here in Europe. And she said something on one of our panels that was like, we're now in a momentum that's unstoppable. So, and I
Mhm.
feel it's true in a way, right? It's just, to your point, everybody, every corner of the world is speaking about women's football finally,
Right.
so, it's good to see. And in terms of
Absolutely.
that growth, is there anything that concerns you, or anything, to keep an eye out for?
Of course, I think my concern is how easy it is for people to get lost in the wrong things, meaning money over impact, right? Doing things the way that the institution of sports has been established by the men's side for over a century. For example, like in the US, major metropolitan areas, that's where we establish programs. That's where we build teams and franchises. Well, who gets to attend those games? It's only the people that have access. And here in the US, we are a majority a rural country. So the youth player, the development attached to that, we're creating more barriers to access and opportunity. And I hope we can see that and try to change that a little bit. And that's why what we're doing at Tallahassee is so incredibly important because we need to prove that this smaller model will work. Um, and then, because you think about like, what about the millions of kids and families that don't have access to attend a match or access the player development pathways if they don't live in those metro areas? And a major problem that we've been facing in the US for decades now, and it's finally caught up to us, is that we don't develop. Now, I'm going to try to say this as clear as possible. We do not develop the best players. We cater to those that can afford it, to those that can live in the right areas and that know the right people. So if you're growing up in a metropolitan area and you have the disposable income and the family structure to support you and your dreams, great. But if you're in the middle of a rural area and the next closest city is 3 hours away to access those resources, you have an incredibly difficult time. So that is my concern, is that we cannot just keep replicating money, 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 big metropolitan areas, big cities, and then we leave everyone else behind. We're not going to culturally make good impact, and we're just going to keep reinforcing barriers, institutional barriers, and barriers to access and entry.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. And I'm just thinking, I mean, at the end of the day, the key to grow the game is in the grassroots levels and really
Mhm.
establishing a base. But
Right.
if you're limiting the base to a certain segment that can actually afford it, you're limiting the
Right.
base, you're capping the growth. So at the end of the day, this
Absolutely.
is this is not just a, call it, impact perspective. It's a business perspective. You want the game to be better.
Mhm.
You want the game to grow. So the more access you
Right.
give to people, the more business you will generate, right? So it all ties together at the end of the day,
Right.
right? Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Wow, this is being a great conversation, Ashlee. But I also want to. I mean, I just I feel obliged to ask about career and leadership advice. Given your
Sure.
background. So if that's okay, I'll just ask a few questions on that topic.
Yeah,
And I want to
absolutely.
start with one that, I mean, please feel free to answer this one or not. Because I was looking at your background. No, you're the first elected female of color for United Soccer Coaches. You're an entrepreneur. You're an owner of a football club. I mean, um, I guess there must have been a lot of challenges that you've had to overcome. So I don't know if you could highlight just a few.
Yep. Yeah, I think the way to sum it up best, in my experience, the more success or the more visibility, the smaller my circle gets. People are brutal, and and sadly, they want to see you fail and ridicule you more than they want to see you succeed. So I think that's probably been the most challenging piece of it. Um, but I think that story could be, it's not just unique to me. I think that's shared, unfortunately, mostly across the board, especially for women and especially for women of color. The circle just gets way smaller, and you really need to draw in on that athletic background that you have of being resilient and getting through and having that growth mindset and being driven by a purpose that's greater than you.
Okay. Wow. Okay. At the end of the day, purpose is kind of like at the root of it all, right? It's purpose at the heart of the club.
Has to be. Yep.
So what drives things forward, no? So that's great to hear. And over the course of your career, and I know there's still a lot to be done, but so far, is there any moment that you're most proud of?
Yeah, so I'll have a little fun with this. I want to take a page from from Issa Rae and Snoop, I'm most proud of myself.
Okay.
My resiliency to stay committed to the movement despite the adversity. I'm most proud that I've created structures and systems of opportunities for players and executives that did not exist for me, but others can now enjoy. Like for example, the Girls Academy League, that commissioner position, it's now highly sought after. We've put two phenomenal women in that role that wouldn't have existed before. To have Mark Krikorian, one of the legends in college women's college soccer, take over the role at Washington Spirit, that's huge for me. And then the same thing with Florida State's women's soccer, being a part of that from the get go and setting records and putting them on the national scene, national ranking, and turning that in, helping turn that into dynasty. That's huge. So just knowing that the work, again, we talk about when things come to fruition, it's not overnight, but doing the grind and doing that work when nobody else wants to, because there's no glitz and glamours of digging the ditches and building that bridge. But when the people get to drive over it and everything, you've done what you're supposed to do.
Thank you for that answer. Actually, reminds me of Ryan Holiday, and how he says that the journey is the reward. That's what I take from
Right.
your answer, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's not what you achieve. It's just kind of like every single day, just grinding it out, and just how when you look back, you see, oh, look at me. I didn't notice. So
Right.
yeah,
It's really, yeah, it's really seeing other people's successes based on what you've built. And for me, that is forever rewarding.
that's very inspiring. Actually,
Mm.
that your legacy is actually based on the success of others. So that's nice to
Mhm.
see. Um,
Right.
and I'm just thinking because also just I mean looking at your background and looking even now at you being a co-founder, I mean a founder and an owner of the Reckoning, right?
Mhm.
You must have faced a lot of risk, right? At the end of the day.
Mhm.
And I was going back to some conversations that were had during World Football Summit Europe, and a lot of the female leaders said something like, for women, it's difficult to take risk because or it's not it's difficult, it's just that they see it as very hard because they feel that this could put in jeopardy all of the work they have put in to get to the position where they are now in
Mhm.
leadership, right? So
Right.
when it comes to the moment of actually taking a risk, they're a bit afraid, right? So
Right.
why is that? Would you agree? Is that what would you have to say to that?
Yeah, I do agree. It kind of goes back to my earlier answer. Sometimes feels like you're fighting against the world, but I think you have to have a very strong core, deeply rooted in something other than soccer, right? Other
Hmm.
than the job. Maybe that's your faith, maybe that's your family, but it has to be yours and it has to be separate. I think that helps you keep your sanity. Um, Maybe it's at serving a higher purpose and intention. And then because the higher you get up and the more visible, you can feel extremely vulnerable and very alone. And you have to be okay with that.
Hmm.
So again, having something that is your own, that's internal, that nobody can take away, the relationship you have with, if that's your higher purpose, your faith or your family. That's what's going to keep you anchored and help you be able to get through anything. So the risk is, it's always okay, because
Yeah.
it'll always end up being okay in the end, because of your core values, your center can't be taken.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. One, you can't live with a what if you didn't take that
Hmm.
risk at the end of the day, right? And second,
Right.
I guess you have to live with yourself. You want to say it like that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, you have to be core to your mission, core to your values, core to your purpose. So and just have to accept that, right?
Right.
So good message. And in from your point of view, what needs to be true to see more women in leadership positions in whether it's the soccer industry or the sports industry in general?
Yeah. So, gosh, to have more women in leadership roles, we really we have not figured out how to create pipelines. So we need to create mentorship programs for development pathways for the next generations, open to all, not just to in circles. We see the same group of small group of folks popping up all over the place. That doesn't help our growth or opportunity for women. And there are certainly well more than 10 to 20 capable and qualified women out there. So I think any established organization, any up and coming organization needs to make sure that they have that front in mind, that how do we create development opportunities and pipelines, pathways for women.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a conversation I had with Erika Montemor on the podcast a few months ago.
Mhm.
And we were saying how important it was to have mentors and sponsors. And we had an analogy of a door, right? When you have a door that you want to walk through, a mentor is going to help you develop the skills to get to that door. And then the sponsor is going to help you open that door in a way, right?
Mhm.
And I think I agree. That's kind of like, it kind of like reminded me of what you just said there, right? We need more of that in the industry, right? So
Absolutely.
interesting. And any other advice you would have for any aspiring female leader out there?
Yes, I understand what motivates you. Why do you want to do this? Network and build relationships through actions, not words. Practice self growth and development through meditation, journaling, reflection practices. And remember, your job is not your life. Your job should be something you do that brings you joy in life. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Nice. Your job is not your identity, right? And
Right.
it goes back to what you said before. It's all purpose at the end of the day. What's your why? Go back to what we were asking at the
Exactly.
beginning. What's your why? And let your why drive you.
Exactly.
Right? It sounds cliche in a way, but it's true. So
It is.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, Actually, this has been a great conversation. But I just have to ask you one final question because I really want to know your opinion on this.
Mhm.
Back in September, we at World Football Summit launched a rebrand. And basically, this rebrand had a powerful message behind it, which is that, we need call it a better football industry, an industry that's committed to innovation, that's committed to, excellence, to sustainability across, its three pillars, no? So it's environmental,
Mhm.
social, and financial. Um, if you were to describe in one or two sentences the soccer industry you want or that you need, how would you do it?
Great question. I think we need to dismantle the elitist mentality we have and remember that soccer belongs to all, not just the top percent, not that top 1%. Um, it belongs to all. The sport first and foremost needs to be accessible and inclusive. And we know this because even the research, decades and decades of research shows that sport has the incredible power to change and save lives.
Amazing, very inspiring. And it's funny how, because I speak with a lot of industry leaders and a lot of you say exactly the same thing. Football belongs to everyone, no? I had this conversation with the CEO of Fortuna Düsseldorf, second division
Mhm.
team in Germany. And he said, football is for the people. I also had this conversation with Preeti Shetty, another remarkable female leader on the podcast, and she said football is a public good, and we have to keep it
Yep.
that way. So at the end of the day, it's great to see, and I agree. At the end of the day, football has to be a source of inspiration, and that everybody can access to. No,
Right.
so thank you for that,
Absolutely.
Ashlee. I want to thank you. This has been great. I was looking forward to
Mhm.
it, and I've been just amazed. I've learned so much on purpose, on business. I mean, it's great. Before we go, I don't know if there's any last words you want to share with the audience, or where people can learn more about you, about the Tallahassee Reckoning, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this has been amazing. I always enjoy having conversations about the game, and hopefully it resonates with somebody. But final words, I would say, look, regardless of your role, make sure you're serving others and something greater than yourself. Lead with a human centric approach. At the end of the day, we all only have one life to live. So how do you want to live it, and what impact do you want to leave on the lives of those around you? Each of us can literally leave the world in a much better place when our lives have passed, and we always have the choice to do that, regardless of our circumstance or situation. For me, if you want to follow along, just connect with me on LinkedIn. And definitely follow along with us on our journey with Tallahassee Reckoning. Hopefully, we do things right and well enough to be able to replicate and change the minds. Our website's it's tlhreckoning.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at tlhreckoning.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you for that. That was an awesome way to end the conversation. So thank you. Thank you for the conversation in general. It's been great. It's been inspiring, and definitely count on us to be following, the Tallahassee Reckoning and on their journey. Hope to bring you back soon and you tell me how it evolves. Okay?
Yes. Love it. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashlee. And there you have her, Ashlee-Fontes, with a masterclass on what being purpose-driven really means. The main takeaways for me were, well, first, I really like her partnership framework. It involves the entire ecosystem, combining local partners, a major international brand, the fans, and the players. It really is about creating impact, not just about money. Also, remember that to overcome an overnight success, you need years of work. Then, overall, what really stands out to me from this conversation is, how purpose-driven she is. At the end of the day, it drives pretty much all of her decision. And being clear on your why is vital to take career or life-defining decisions. And finally, the football she wants belongs to all. We have spoken about this with other leaders. Football is a public good, and it can change the world. Never forget that. Did anything else stand out to you? Let us know on social media. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. Oh, before we go, if you're ever in Madrid and you're looking for a place to network effectively, share a traditional Spanish snack but with a modern touch, or just enjoy a relaxing moment for yourself with a delicious sweet pastry to break your day, make sure you visit La Hermosita. You won't miss. I'm not kidding when I tell you that I recently bought my wife a small piece of pie for a special occasion and she just loved it. So again, visit La Hermosita, and when you go there, make sure you tell them you heard about them on the World Football Summit podcast. You can find the link to the website on the notes of the episode. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, where you can find the link in the show notes. And on that newsletter, every week, we share updates about our events, industry trends, dynamics, everything. Anyway, I hope you were inspired. I surely was. And I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.